That being our platform, our foundation, our context, let me just share with you what to put behind you so that you kind of ignore it so it gets smaller, and what to put before you so that it even gets stronger and more clear and bigger. Here we go. Because, by the way, we choose. I choose, you choose, we all choose what we put before us. We all choose what we put behind us. So it's a choice, and this is a beautiful thing about this lesson. You and I can choose to focus on the right things, which will make us better, help others, or we can focus on the wrong things, which will diminish us and diminish those that are around us. So let's go. Number one, put behind you, I'm putting behind this behind me, put behind you devaluing people, and put before you, right in front of you so you can focus on it, valuing people. Now, I'm going to share with you 4 thoughts here quickly, but this one is the main thought, and it's the beginning thought, because I tell you this is the foundation of everything I want to teach. And here it is, very simple. In fact, in our coaching company on the John Maxwell team, the first thing I teach them about John Maxwell team DNA is the fact that we are people of value who value people. And because we are people of value, and we value people, what do? We add value to people. And so I want you to know that what you need to focus on right now is the fact that you value people. And because I am a faith person, I follow the teachings of Jesus. And if you follow his teachings in the Gospels, the one thing you come to a conclusion with when you read all 4 of them is the fact that when Jesus was on earth, he truly valued everyone. Everyone. No matter who they were, no matter what they did, he valued everyone. Now, this is essential, and this is so needed right now in the time that we're living in, for us to begin to look at each other and not put us against them or devalue them because they don't look like us or they don't act like us. No. We need to understand that it all begins with valuing people. Nothing more, nothing less. I remember I was several years ago now in Kiev, Ukraine, and I was getting ready to speak to 12,000 people. I was in the green room, and my translator was in the room with me. And he said, "John, I've read your books." And he said, "I just want to prepare you before you go out to speak to this crowd, that I know in your books and in your teaching, you talk about all the time adding value to people. That's what leaders do. In fact, you teach us the first step of a leader is to add value to people. That's why we lead." He said, "I just want you to know you're about to go talk to people that for 70 years were under communism. They haven't been valued. And when you walk out and talk about adding value to people as a leader, they're not going to at all connect with you because the leaders they know haven't added value to them at all." So he said, "I just want you to understand that as you get ready to speak to them." I had about 15 minutes. He left the green room, and I thought, "Oh my, I've got to think this thing through," and I did. And I wanted to make sure that I connected with the people, and I walked out, and I remember looking at them, and I asked them 2 questions in the beginning. I said, number one is, how many of you are suspicious of leaders? And of the 12,000 people there, I think 11,998 raised their hands. I said, how many of you have ever been hurt by leaders? And again, they all raised their hands. And basically, they were sharing with me visually what my translator was sharing with me in the green room, is they had never known leaders to add value to them. And so that day I said, well, let me talk to you about the first step of leadership. And the first step is very simple. You value people. In fact, you shouldn't lead people if you don't value them. Because what happens is, instead of helping them, you'll manipulate advantage of them. You'll use them for your personal advantage. And instead of helping them and serving them, you'll want them to serve you. And that's just a bad leadership picture. You don't ever want to go there. The first step of leadership, good leadership, is that we value people. But it's also the first step of just behavior in society, that we value people. When I look at the situation we're in right now, I can promise you it's because we don't value one another. We truly don't look at ourselves as our brother's keeper. And so therefore we lack respect, and we lack honor. We lack appreciation for others. We just live our life the way we want to live our life. And we basically really don't about other people. In fact, every day I do a very simple practice. I'm just going to give it to you. I mean, this could be literally an hour teaching in itself, but every day I intentionally add value to people, and every day I do 5 things. Every day, first of all, I start off my day by saying to myself and to others, I value you. That's my foundation. Because again, if I don't value you, I won't add value to you. That's a fact. So every day I begin my day by saying I value people. Everyone. Everyone. So, because I value people, that's the first thing. The second thing is I look for ways to add value to people. And I think of ways to add value to people. And I do things that add value to people. And then I encourage others to add value to people, just like I'm doing to you right now, as encouraging you in the place that we are right now in our country to begin to again understand these people are God's creation. They deserve respect. They deserve value. And so that's the first thing I want to share with you, that we need to come together and begin to value. The second thing I want us to focus on is I want you to put behind you, in other words, get this behind you, selfish values. Values that maybe help you but don't help others. And instead of selfish values, what's in it for me and what am I going to gain? And if it's not in it for me, then I don't care about the rest of you. And put behind you those selfish values and put before you just good, solid values. And this is essential. I can think back in the early 1990s when in corporate America there began to be a real problem with ethics. You remember the Enron crisis? I was at that time writing for Time Warner, and I can still remember the leader of Time Warner, the CEO, called me up to New York, and we had a long dinner, and he said, John, somebody needs to write a book on business ethics, and he's, because of all the corporations that are just not treating people right. And he said, I want you to write the book. And I smiled at him. I said, well, I don't think I can. He said, well, why not? I said, well, because, Larry, there's no such thing as business ethics. He said, well, what do you mean? Look at how the businesses are not doing right for the people and how they're misleading them and how they're dishonest. And he starts going through this litany of all the ethical issues in business. And I said, Larry, stop. There's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. And if you have them, it works in business. But it also works in community. It works in family. It works everywhere. And if you don't have them, they don't work anywhere. And he looked at me and he said, oh, I got it. And he said, well, can you do this? I said, well, I'm not sure. Give me a month to think about it. Because then I asked myself, in a world that is very diverse, with different cultures and thinking and rationale and religions, etc., I said, can I find common ground for everybody to kind of stand on and buy into? And after giving it about a month with some of my research and writing team, I came up and I said, yeah, I can write that book, but I'm going to write it on the golden rule. Just very simply, treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. By the way, the golden rule is in every culture and it's in every religion. And so that was our foundation. I said, let's start with the golden rule. So I wrote the book. And it found it to be a great help for people today. In fact, it's still in print. It's called Ethics 101. But the point being is very simple. I wrote that book, and after writing it and seeing how it helped people just understand, if you just do the golden rule, if we just live by that, then things get better and our values get better, and we begin to value each other because we treat others as we would like to be treated. I began to be just consumed with the idea that if you could teach values to people, and if people could learn good values and live good values, they would become more valuable to themselves, but they would become more valuable to the people around them. And it's out of that, because I live in a leadership world, that we not only trained 5 million leaders in every country of the world, but it was out of that we began to go into countries, invited by the presidents, prime ministers of the countries, to have what we call transformation tables where you sit around and you discuss good values, and you learn them from each other, and you flesh them out with each other, and you encourage one another, and what really, really works. The moment I put good values in front of myself and I say, I'm going to learn them, I'm going to live them, all of a sudden what I focus on expands. I become a person of value in a greater degree, and I begin to add value to so many more people. And that's absolutely huge. In fact, John Varican just texted me this morning, and in Latin America, where we've been working with 3 different countries, he said, John, we have over now 2 million people sitting in small groups, round tables, and he said, that have been learning and living out good values. Well, to be honest with you, I think in America, I think we have lost our way. And I think that we've gotten away from some great values, such as the Golden Rule, which allowed us as a people and as a country to be great. I was just reading recently, I've just always admired so much Dr. Martin Luther King. And he was such a terrific leader, and just talk about transformation. It was amazing the good that he did. Okay, and I'm just reading one quote that I put in my notes this morning, and it's from Dr. Martin Luther King, and he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. He said, we are tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I've thought about him so much, about his incredible values of nonviolence, strong, courageous, peaceful the peaceful process, and just how he stood for right, not only in principle, but in spirit and in attitude. It's a value. And it was a value that was very effective for him, for all of us in America. And I just want to say for all of us that let's just put before ourselves the good values, and put behind us selfish thinking, or does it just benefit me, or I'm only into it or for it if it does. Okay, the third thing I want us to focus on, because what we focus on expands, the third thing I want to share with you today is let's put behind us, put behind you, let me put behind myself, pointing. Pointing at someone else is the problem. Pointing to the other side. Let's put behind us pointing, finding someone else to blame, and instead let's put before us listening. Now, I almost putting before us the word caring, because I love that word, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific, because I think when you care for a person, one of the things you do is you value that person enough to listen, to seek out their perspective, to seek out their opinion. I remember in 1997 when I moved to Atlanta, and there was such a vibrant, beautiful African-American community there. And I so desperately wanted to know them and meet them and hear their experiences. And for 3 years, every 4 months, just 3 times a year, I would have a dinner with different groups from that community. And I would sit there, and it was my treat to have dinner for them. But what I really want to do is just ask them questions and tell me about your journey. It's so helpful. I learned so much. It was at that table of caring, of listening, of respecting, of valuing other people, that they just taught me, and I learned, and I sat at their feet, and I thanked them, and I became a better leader because of them. I had a much better perspective about them. And one of the things I've discovered is this is just a huge discovery, and I think it'll help you. One of my great discoveries is the fact that when you sit down and listen to people and respect people and value people and want to hear their opinion, the closer I get to know people, the more I like those people. And when we build walls of division and partisanship, and it's us against them, and that whole process, that just isn't going to bring us to where we want to go. So let's put behind us the pointing, and it's you and me and your side and my side. Let's put that, and let's put right in front of us. Let's put right in front of us, caring enough to listen to people. I just met a new friend, Tina Singleton, who's been in the Peace Corps for many years and has traveled worldwide, and she's just a beautiful person. And she has a nonprofit organization called Transformation Table. And I called her because I love that word. We're into transformation ourselves and helping people with values, and I wanted to get acquainted with her. And she talked about the fact that as she looked at all the division and partisanship, that she kept asking herself, what can I do? What can I do to make a difference? And because of her vast experience, she's traveled around the world, and she has constantly been in cultures that were divisive. She's constantly been in the middle of two different sides and the pointing and all that stuff. And she said, John, I finally realized that if you could just get people even from two different sides to sit down at a table and cook a good meal. And she put a good emphasis on some good food and at the same table at the same time. Amazing, all things, all the differences that began to fade away as we began to find common ground. I love that conversation with her. In fact, because it's her nonprofit that has the Transformation Table, I just asked her if we could just use it too. We'd always give her the credit for it, obviously, but if we could use it too, because that's what we call our round tables when we teach values, transformation tables. And she was so kind and wonderful, and she agreed, and she's just a truly beautiful person. Now, the point that I'm trying to make and share with you today is this. Instead of letting our differences separate us, can we not sit down and say that we have more in common than we have different? Because we do. You see, when I look at where we are in America right now, to be honest with you, I get kind of discouraged. I think, wow, this is kind of a bad area, bad time for us. This is not a good time. And then I got to reflecting this morning about, is this the worst that it's ever been in America? And I honestly think that when I was growing up as a teenager, if you go back to the 1960s, those were dark times in our country. Just if you'll think about Kennedy and Malcolm X, they were both assassinated. Hatred, assassination, killings. They were both assassinated about 2 years apart. And then you just move up a few more years in the 60s, and you go to Robert Kennedy, and you go to Martin Luther King, and they were assassinated just 2 months apart. I remember where I was when each one of those people were assassinated, and I remember how sad I was, and I was sad for America. I was just sad for the condition we were in. And as I look back at the 1960s, riots in cities, the Vietnam War, protesting. I look back then and I say, wow, it wasn't good back then either. But there was a difference. And I don't want you to miss this difference. I feel that the leadership of our country back then, oh yes, we still had two parties, two different ways of approaching how they should lead the country. But there seems to be a willingness to cross the aisle, to come together. You see, democracy doesn't work really great divided. It works great when there is a common good. And I felt back then that the people, the leaders of our country, put the people before the party. I don't feel that way now. You see, George Washington didn't want America to have two political parties because he said the moment that happens, they'll be more interested in valuing and in supporting the party than they will to be of leading and adding value to the people. And I'm not trying to be nasty. I'm not trying to be overly negative. But every time I hear somebody that's a politician speak, I ask. And what's sad about it is it's usually their agenda. It's not our agenda. It's not what's best for the people. If we really wanted what was best for the people, we would, again, put behind us our selfish interest and we would put before us the best for the people. And what's best for the people may not always be best for me. But there's a bigger picture than me. With one trifling exception in the world, the rest of the world is composed of others. I just happen to be one out of several billion. And so I have to have maturity, and maturity is seeing things, having a perspective that you see things from other people's viewpoint. Immaturity is when I see things just from my viewpoint, and so therefore I'm right and you're wrong. And I tell you, it's killing America. It's not helping us at all. It's not building the people and the country that we need to. It's a major way to devalue people, and it's not right. And as a leader, I just tell you, it's not right. And my heart breaks over this. And it breaks because honestly, we're better than this. One of the things that a crisis does is it usually brings the worst out of people, and we're seeing right now some of us at our very worst. But that's not really who we are. That's not really who we are. We just sometimes let our base feelings, our humanness, our lowest part of ourselves kind of begin to take emotional control of who we are. Which brings me to the last point. Number 4, I would like for us to put behind us our reactions and put before us our reflections. I would like us to minimize reaction, and I would like us to maximize and focus on reflection, because during a crisis, there are 3 zones, and one of the zones is the fear zone. And a fear zone, when we become fearful, and by the way, I want to time out for a moment. I understand why many of you are fearful. I haven't walked in your shoes, so I don't ever pretend to know what you go through. But because I value you, because I unconditionally love you, and because I believe that you have within you a bigger self and a best self, I just want you to know that I honestly can't say I know what you know, because I don't, and I feel what you feel because I don't. But what I know is that that the emotions that we all have, the emotions that I have when I'm under stress, they don't bring out the best of John Maxwell. I say things I shouldn't say. I do things I shouldn't do. I have to look at myself sometimes. I tell people when they ask me what my greatest leadership challenge is, I say I'm my greatest leadership challenge. Leading others is kind of easy, but leading myself, that isn't too easy. If I had to kick the person most responsible for my problems, I probably wouldn't be able to sit down for a week, okay? So a lot of times I got to say, it's me, oh Lord, standing in need of prayer, or the need of correction, or the need of change. No doubt about that. I got that. But in a crisis, when fear grips us, it normally doesn't bring out the best of us. So that's one zone in a crisis, the fear zone, and then another zone that we can be, and we can get out of that faith zone and go into what I call the learning zone, and the learning zone is all about reflection. And here's what I know: I don't like what we're going through, but there are lessons that we all can learn if we would listen to one another, and if we would be open and caring and value one another. There are lessons to be learned. When I have what I call learning lunches, which I've had for 40 years, every month I sit down with somebody bigger, better, faster, smarter than me, take them to lunch, ask them questions to learn from them. And one of the 7 questions I ask them is, what is the most important leadership lesson you've ever learned? And every time I've asked this question, hundreds of times, and regardless of who I'm asking, no matter where I'm asking it, no matter what their background is, when I ask them, what's the most important leadership lesson you've ever learned, they all come to me and basically they say, they give me the lesson, but here's the context of the lesson, the foundation, the soil where that lesson was birthed and grown out of was dark days. I've never had a person say, John, the most important leadership lesson I learned was in good times. It was always in dark, bad times. And the reason I want us to put before us reflection right now is if we will reflect, there is there's a lesson for all of us. There are several lessons for me that I'm learning. We'll get better because of this if we reflect instead of react. And then there's the third zone, which is the improvement zone. And that's where we not only learn, but from our learning we get better. And that should be our response. You know, a couple days ago, when some of the protesting got a little bit out of hand, and Mayor Bottoms did what I thought was a pretty amazing job of talking to her city. I loved how she talked about her love for the city. I thought it was a very strong, good leadership talk. And she made a statement, and she said to the people of Atlanta, she's talking about not the protesting, not the peaceful protesting. She was talking about the rioting, those things. She said, what I see happening on the streets of Atlanta is not Atlanta. And I thought, oh, there's a wise leader. She knows that the reaction is causing the worst out of some people, but she knows that's not really who you are. She knows that we are all better than our worst reactions. I don't know about you, but I've had some things in my life that I've said and done that I'd like to go back and do over again because it wasn't the best of John Maxwell. I know that's what I did, but that wasn't really who I was. I feel that same way about you. I feel that same way about America. I know we're not in our best moment right now, but that's not really who we are. And so as I just kind of close out my little talk with you today, I hope it's been helpful. Again, remember, I give it to you out of the fact that I believe in you, value you, and unconditionally love you. And if I've misspoken anywhere, I'm sorry, but I am human, and I misspeak sometimes. But I want you to go beyond just what I've said to you, and I want you to go right to my heart. Because, as I said earlier, we are all better than this. But we will only be better than what we are now if we put before us the four things I gave you. If we put before us, and I repeat them quickly now, if we put before us the fact that we value people, if we put before us that we learn and live out good values, if we focus on and put before us that we're going to care and listen, and if we decide to put before us the fact that we're going to learn and reflect from what we're going through. You see, because I believe in you, I think those four things are going to become a part of your daily activity for these next few weeks. And because I value you, I know this. Good values will bring the best out of you. So, I've shared this from my heart to you. I hope it helps. The main thing I want you to know is just very simply,
this is how much God loved the world. He gave his Son, his one and only Son, and this is why, so that no one need be destroyed by believing in him. Anyone can have a whole and lasting life. God didn't go to all the trouble of sending his Son merely to point an accusing finger, telling the world how bad it was. He came to help, to put the world right again. I'm sorry, it wasn't on the screen, was it? Okay, what a way to start, okay? But you got you heard the passage. And the thesis today of the lesson is that valuing people is essential to helping them find God. In fact, if you don't value people, it is impossible to help them find God. Do not miss what I'm about to teach. You see, we have a choice in this culture that we live in today. We have a choice to either curse the darkness, and that's what most people do, or we have a choice to turn on the light. And we got to ask ourselves, where am I going to be in my life? Am I going to talk about how difficult this time is, and am I going to be divisive in my life, or am I going to be salt and light? And we have two challenges. And the challenge, in our culture today, we have two challenges. I see it so clearly. The first challenge is that we've lost our way in the area of values. We have probably now at least one, if not two generations that hasn't grown up in learning and living out good values in their own life. And then we have another challenge, and that is because we have lost our way with values, we cease to value people. I mean, we cease to value God's created race. I was in a conversation with a good friend of mine, Kevin Myers, recently, and he said, John, you're known for valuing people. And he said, how did you come to that place? How did you come to the place where you value people? When I talk about valuing people, I'm talking about valuing everyone. Okay? See, we have no problem with me teaching that it's important for us to value people as long as it's the people we value. But we have a horrendous problem valuing people who are not like us, people who do not have our values at all. It's kind of like, you know what, John, this is a good message if you talk about valuing people I like, but if you're going to talk about valuing people I don't like, just remember as I teach this lesson, my name is John, and I'm your friend. So here's my journey. It's a little bit more about me. I'm going to get to Jesus as soon as I possibly can, trust me. And by the way, when I give you my journey, I'm uncomfortable with because it's about me a little bit, but I'm also uncomfortable because it makes me look a little better than I really am. So as I talk about it, just say, he's not that good. And that'll make me feel better, and that'll make you feel better, and because I'm not that good, okay? But my journey in valuing people, it's a legitimate journey, and it begins, first of all, with my father's example. My father passed away last year on July 4th at 98, and my father valued and loved everyone. In fact, when he was 90, we were having a conversation one day, and he said, John, isn't it wonderful that as I get older, as people get older, isn't it wonderful as people get older how much more they love people? And I said, that's not true. I said, I know a lot of people, they're getting older, but they don't love people more. I know a lot of people, they get older and they're grouchier. I know a lot, I mean, the reason that you do is because you valued people all your life. And here's what happens. As you get older, everything exaggerates. And if it's good, it exaggerates in a positive way. And if it's bad, it exaggerates in a very negative way. And my father was living a life of valuing people, of which it was natural for him as he grew older to even love them more. And the greatest advice he ever gave me was when I graduated from college. He said, John, if you will value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people, he said, you will always have people that want to follow you. And that grid of valuing people, believing people, and unconditionally loving people has stayed with me all of my life. Every time I write a book, I write it because I value people. I believe in them. I believe the best in them. I unconditionally love them. Every time I teach a lesson, I go through that grid. And it's my father's example. And the values lesson I pull from that is very simple. How I value people determines how I view people. Don't miss that. My value of people determines my perspective of them. Another way to say it is how I view things is how I do things. How I view people is how I value people. My second experience in valuing people was what I call my evangelism awakening, and that was in my first little church in southern Indiana, and there was a man in the hospital that didn't go to our church, but his two sisters did. His name was Jim, and I visited him in the hospital. The sister said, would you visit Jim? He doesn't come to church, and I did, and I liked Jim, and Jim liked me, and we had a wonderful conversations over a couple-week period of time. Every 2 or 3 days, I'd go see him. I liked him. In fact, I liked him so much, and he liked me so much, he said, He said, John, he said, when I get out of the hospital, I'm going to come to church. And I told Jim's sisters, Jim's going to come to church. Hey, Jim's coming to church. It's just so good Jim's coming to church. And we got all excited, but there was a problem. Jim died. And I was the last person to see him before he died. Literally about an hour after I visited him in the hospital, he passed away. Now, this was an awakening in my life because I realized that my priorities were wrong. I had put the church, which is a wonderful place to come, I put the church above sharing my faith. And come to church and come to church and come to church. And we know coming to church doesn't change a person's life. Coming to Jesus changes a person's life. And I had my priorities all messed up, and God took me through a 6-month wilderness experience of was I going to value people and share my faith wherever they were at the moment that I could, or was I going to constantly just kind of mess up my priorities? I can still remember standing between the two sisters. In that day, there was a custom in Indiana of viewing the body. And so the two of us are just there. And here we are. And I'm doing that. And I'm crying. And they think I'm such a compassionate person. I'm not a compassionate person. I'm weeping and repenting because I didn't value him to the place of sharing my faith with him. And he was lost. And it was life-changing. It was gripping to me. In fact, I only made one request at that time that I've honored for, my gosh, now almost 50 years. I said, God, if you'll just help me to be able to win people to Christ, if you'll just help me to be able to effectively share my faith, I'll never ask you to have a great church. I'll never ask for anything else. Just help me to constantly see people through my life and influence come together. Help me value people enough to help them and to help find them and keep them from being lost. And that was the only prayer request I ever asked God in the area of my pastoral ministry. I mean, by the time I was 29, I had the 10th largest church in America, but I never asked for a large church. All I asked was to value people, because it's all about people. So people say to me, John, what is your first love? Is it leading? Is it writing? Is it speaking? And I love all that, but that isn't my first love. My first love is sharing my faith. You that are here today on all of the campuses, I just want you to know that there's nothing more important to me than to let you know how much God loves you and how much God can change your life and how much beautiful it is when you give your heart to him. But it all begins by the fact that God values you. And I want to be God-like. And if God values you, I want to value you. And I don't want to miss this. I don't want to miss this. So the values lesson here is just very simple. Value people like God values people. My third journey in valuing people is what I call my Zig lesson. And I call it my Zig lesson. Many of you would know this if you're especially a little bit older, but Zig Ziglar was a great motivational speaker, writer. And when I was young, I heard Zig one time say, if you will help people get what they want, they'll help you get everything in life that you want. And I remember it was a paradigm shift for me, because as a young leader, I was trying to get everybody on my team, and here's my vision, and join me. And all of a sudden, Zig says, you know what, if you'll just turn that around, and if you'll just go value people and help them be successful, they'll help you be successful. And it was an incredible change. It was the moment that servanthood and serving people and placing people first became a huge priority in my life. And I went from people adding value to me to me adding value to them. It was a total change. And through my life, I've had many what I call servanthood surprises. But maybe the greatest servanthood surprise I've ever had was this. I knew it was right to serve people, but when I started serving people is when I started valuing people. Okay, stay with me. If I see you as hurting, I'll help you. If I see you as broken, I'll fix you. But if I see you as valuable, I'll serve you. You see, in the first two paradigms, I see you as hurting, I help you. I see you as broken, I fix you. I have the upper hand. I mean, honestly, I'm the guy that came in and I kind of rescued you. It's kind of like almost a, ooh, here I am to save the day. But I have the upper hand. You look to me and say, you're awesome. But, probably without you, I'd still be lost. But do you see how it changes when I see you as valuable? When I see you as valuable, I serve you. And I not only serve you, but I relish and just enjoy the fact that I get to serve you. And why is it? Because I see you as valuable. And so the Zig lesson basically taught me, just always put people first, always. It's not like a question, just put them first. And then another lesson that I had was what I call I'll have to explain this one, my hot stove lesson. Mark Twain said, if a cat sits on a hot stove, that cat won't sit on a hot stove again. And then he said, that cat don't like cold stoves either. That cat just stays away from stoves. Why? A bad experience. And in my younger years as a pastor, I had a young man that had such potential, and I loved him, and I equipped him, and I trained him, and I poured my life into him. And I was naive. Of course I was naive. I was young, and I would look at him, and I'd say, you and I will do life and ministry together, all of our life. And I was just giving everything I got, only to find out that I got betrayed, literally had to fire him, lost a relationship. And I said to myself, I don't like this. And I honestly, I said, I think what I'll do is that instead of embracing people and giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think I'll hold people at a distance. And I think what I'll do is I'll hire staff, but I'll say, that's your job, this is my job, we'll meet at the Christmas party. And for about 6 months, that's exactly what I did. And then I discovered something. I discovered something that really helped change my life again. I discovered the good news is if I help people, if I didn't value them, if I didn't think the best of them, if I somehow, because I got hurt by them, kind of isolated myself from them, here's what I found. The good news was that if I kept myself isolated and protected and walls, etc., the good news is they couldn't hurt me. But the bad news is they couldn't help me. So I made a conscious decision. Let them in. Let them in. Take the walls down. Value them right where they are. And the values lessons I learned in that period of my life was don't allow a bad experience to become a lifetime experience. How often I see people who, they've had a bad experience. We all have. We all have our stories. But instead of letting it be a bad experience and moving on, it becomes a lifetime experience. And we build walls, and instead of embracing and valuing others, we have a tendency to keep them away. The next lesson I learned on values was my Enron lesson. And all I've got to do is say Enron, and many of you that are old enough will think about 20 years ago, 2001, when the corporate scandals began, where big companies were taking advantage of their employees. And all of a sudden, the house of cards began to fall. And I was called to New York City by Time Warner, who was my publisher at the time. They said, we want you to write a book on business ethics because the businesses aren't ethical. And I looked at him and I said, I can't write a book on business ethics. They said, why not? I said, because there's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. You either got them or you don't. Hey, and if you have them, they work in business. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. You see, leaders, The advantage leadership has is leaders see more than others see, and leaders see before others see. And if I can see more and before other people around me, it puts me at a distinct advantage over other people. Now, the question is, when I have that distinct advantage, am I going to add value to people and value people and make their life better, or am I going to add value to me and make my life better? That's the question. Am I going to motivate them and move them for mutual advantage, or am I going to manipulate them and move them for personal advantage? And out of the Enron experience, I wrote a book, Ethics 101. In fact, it's of all the books I've ever written, it's the book that got the most awards. And the only reason I can figure that out is no one else writes about ethics. But here's what was powerful. I wrote it based on the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. It's a value. It's a beautiful value. And that's when I realized that values, wow, are above the law. Again, I don't know if this is going on the screen now. Just maybe it will be and maybe it won't. Surprise, surprise. Galatians 5. The fruit of the Spirit, or the fruit produced by the Holy Spirit within you, is divine love. It ain't gonna happen. I'm sorry, just give me a moment. My sense of humor is wanting to take over right now, and you have to understand. Some people say, I cannot believe what you say. You'd be more impressed if you knew what I didn't say. Trust me. Then you would really be impressed, okay? Okay, here we go. The fruit of the Spirit, the fruit produced by the Holy Spirit within you, is divine love. And in all of its varied expressions, here's what I want you to catch. Here's what divine love looks like. The fruit of the Spirit in your life. This should be within us as believers, friends. This is the fruit of who we are as Christians. Joy that overflows, peace that subdues, patience that endures, kindness in action. Kindness in action. Faith that prevails, gentleness of heart, and strength of spirit. Never set the law above these qualities, above these values, for they are meant to be limitless. The values lesson is simple. Great values are greater than any law that could be passed. Let me tell you something. You can make a law in the land, but if you don't have good values, you'll still break it. We don't have a law problem in America. We have a values problem. And it starts on the inside. It starts on the heart. Don't force it. Don't force it. Don't force it. Number 6, my 6th lesson was the crossover lesson in experience. And this was when I've been writing books for many years, and my publisher in Nashville told me that my books were being read by the secular and business community more than the Christian community, and I had no idea. I had never planned that. It was a surprise to me. But the point that I want to make here in this lesson is that the moment that I realized that I was influencing lost people, that I was influencing non-Christians, I felt immediately called to that world. I said, I'm going to cross over. And my motto was the Apostle Paul, who so beautifully said, I entered their world. And I tried to experience things from their point of view. This is powerful. Paul said, I want you to know, I entered the world of lost people, and I tried to experience things from their point of view. And that was my commitment, to take Christ to people that would never come to church, to share the love of God to people that are never going to be in this type of a surrounding, that honestly, if somebody doesn't reach them, they're just going to be lost. And here's what I discovered. The closer I got to those people, the more I loved them. Don't miss this. The closer I got to them, the more I love them. You said, my job. That seems a little surprising. It shouldn't be. When Mark tells about Jesus going from the cities and the villages, what did it say? As he went from village to village, as he saw them, sheep without a shepherd, he had compassion on them. When did Jesus be moved with compassion? When he went and hung around with lost people. You see, you don't get compassion for lost people in church. You don't get compassion for lost people in a prayer meeting. You get compassion for lost people when you go out and live with lost people. And it doesn't happen. We don't kind of mystically pray this stuff in. But the moment you see them and you see their hurting and you see their brokenness and you see their lostness, all of a sudden you just begin to fall in love with them. I had a wonderful experience right before COVID. A year ago in February, I took some leaders, some business executives to Israel with me. Business executives that I had helped share my faith, and many of them I had helped lead to Christ. And when we went to the baptism, when we went to the Jordan to baptize them, I've been to the Jordan many times, baptized a lot of people. But on this day, I was an emotional wreck as I was in that water. And in comes Becky, who was a Mormon, that I led to Jesus Christ. And then in came Diana, who was a Buddhist, that I led to Christ. And then came Roddy. He came into the water, and I baptized him. He was an agnostic, and Susan was a Jehovah Witness. And then there was John, who was a Jewish brother. And I'm just baptizing these people, and I'm just saying, it doesn't get any better than this. It doesn't get any better than this. We have a coaching company called the John Maxwell Team. And we have thousands of beautiful Muslims in our organization. And they come to Orlando for the training period. And there'll be 3,000-4,000 people because we do it twice a year for new coaches that are becoming part of our organization. And we just love them, and we just have open arms, and we just care for them, and we just serve them, and we just let the love of God be in our life. And inevitably, at the end of the conference, they'll come to me. And they'll say, I can't get over how much you love us. I can't get over how much you value us as people. And we have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them come to Christ. But they come to Christ because we value them. If they don't like you, they won't like your God. What part of this teaching do you not understand? And if you're kind of on that deal, I'm trying to set the world straight, as if you're perfect, I go back to John 3:16 in the middle. God didn't go to all the trouble of sending his son merely to point an accusing figure, telling the world how bad it is. He came to help get the world right again. And by the way, if you want to straighten other people out, good luck about yourself. You ain't so hot either. You see, the closer I get to them, the more I love them. The farther I am away from them, the more I judge them. When you're far, you judge. When you're close, you love. And the values lesson there is just be intentional in developing relationships with lost people. Now let's go to the main thing, the main one. It's my Jesus walk. If you want to be Jesus-like, if you want to be Christ-like, it begins with valuing people. If you want to be like Jesus, value everyone. I mean, when Jesus saw Zacchaeus, he said, Zacchaeus, let's go to lunch today. Everybody in the town of Jericho was absolutely appalled because Zacchaeus was a crooked man. Zacchaeus took advantage of people. Zacchaeus stole money from people. And they're looking at Jesus and saying, why would Jesus have lunch with a crook? Because Jesus said, that's why I came to this world. Understand this. The only people that had a hard time with Jesus valuing everyone was religious people. religious people, because he wasn't hanging enough around them. The reason he wasn't hanging enough around them is because he came for lost people. Let me explain something to you. When you go to heaven, you get to hang with Jesus for eternity. And you get to hang with Christians for eternity. We're only here for a few years on this earth, not long. Here's the thought: hang with lost people now. Share your faith now. When you get to heaven, you get to hang with Christians. Quit being so, I got to get to my group of Christians one more time. My name's John. I'm your friend. See, the town couldn't understand Jesus hanging with Zacchaeus. The disciples couldn't understand Jesus hanging with the Samaritan woman. It's a thief on the cross that looks at Jesus and receives grace in his last dying hour. I mean, the woman caught in adultery. Hey, the religious people were trying to write her off. And Jesus, wanted to write her into his story. You see, religion places lost people on the outside, and we build walls. Relationships place lost people on the inside, and we build bridges. Self-righteous people are seldom aware of their judgmental spirit. I brought this along, if I can find it, yeah. Maybe this will say it better than I can say it. Haven't pulled out a laminated card for a long time. You have to understand, when something's important, I laminate it, okay? If I would have been Moses at Mount Sinai, I'd have laminated the 10 Commandments. And I'd have found and stuck them in every Jewish pocket that I could find. I just picked it. This will probably teach what I'm wanting to teach better than anything else I could say. A man fell into a pit, and he couldn't get himself out. A subjective person came along and said, I feel for you down there. An objective person came along and said, it's logical that someone would fall down there. A Christian scientist came along and said, you only think you're in a pit. The Pharisee came along and said, only bad people fall into a pit. The news reporter came along and wanted an extensive story on the pit. A fundamentalist said, you deserve your pit. A Calvinist said, if you were saved, you had never fallen in the pit. A Wesleyan said, you were saved and you still fell in the pit. A charismatic said, just confess you're not in the pit. A realist came along and said, oh, now that's a pit. A geologist came along and appreciated the rock strata of the pit. An IRS man came along and asked if he was paying taxes on the pit. County inspector asked if he had a special permit to be in the pit. A self-pitying person said, you haven't seen anything until you've seen my pit. The Las Vegas gamblers said chances are anyone could fall into the pit. Optimists said things could be worse, and a pessimist said things will get worse. And Jesus, seeing the man in the pit, reached down his hand and he took him out. I would hope that God is talking to your heart. And I would hope two things are happening in this lesson today. One is I would hope that we who are Christ followers would begin to see the big picture, that we value everyone, every person, God's creation. We value everyone. But if you're not a person of faith, if you don't have a relationship with God, I would hope that today, as you're listening to this teaching on all of our campuses, I would hope today that you would feel valued. Because I want you to know, God loves you so much. He gave his only son, Jesus. He said, son, I want you to go and I want you to live in their world, encounter all the things that they have to encounter, teach good lessons. But the reason I'm putting you on earth is you have to die. Because the only way that sin can ever be taken from the lives of people is if I give my son, my only son, for their salvation. That's what he did. That's what he did. You may say, well, John, you have no idea who I am. You have no idea what I've done. You don't have any idea the mess my life has become. I have no idea. You're exactly right. But I do have an idea of what God can do for you. And I do have an idea of what Jesus wants to do in you. He wants to forgive you of every sin. He wants to claim you as his own. He wants to give you life more abundantly than you've ever experienced. And he wants to give you the hope of heaven. And I want you on all of the campuses, including here, to bow your heads now with me. Would you please? You're such a tremendous audience. You have been so receptive to this message that I've shared. I wonder how many of you on all the campuses, including this one right now, I wonder how many of you would raise your hand and say, hey, John, I feel that God loves me and God values me. And I think I could trust my life with somebody that cares for me as much as he. And I would like to know God in a personal way. I would love to know that every sin is forgiven. And I would love to know that I have a relationship with Jesus. Every day, there are 5 things that I do. And the 5 things that I'm going to share with you right now, truly, tangibly, definitely add value to others. Let me give them to you. Every day, I value people. What that means is that I look at every person and I place great value in that person. And people will say to me sometimes, well, John, you speak to the masses and you tell everybody you value them, but you don't really know those people. How can you value someone you don't know? And I said, well, that's true. I don't know the person, but I know the creator of that person. God created you in his image, after his likeness. Let me tell you something. The fact that God created you tells you how much he values you. And if God would value you enough to create you and give you a purpose in life, then by all means, I'm going to value you because of who he is and what he's done for you. Now, valuing people is very important, and here's why. If I value you as a person, then I'll look for ways to add value to you. The opposite's also true. If I don't value you as a person, I won't look for ways to add value to you. You see, how I value you is how I view you. And so, I tell leaders all the time, if you ever stop loving your people, stop leading your people. Why? Because when we don't value the people that we lead, we manipulate them. That's always wrong. Manipulating people is to move people for personal advantage. That's never right. And so valuing people is core. It's center to every person adding value to others. I add value to you because I value you. It's just that simple. So every day, I value you. In fact, that's why I'm here with Pastor Jose today. That's why I'm talking with you at Life Project, because I value you. Number 2,
Every day. Remember, I do these things every day. 1, every day I value people. 2, every day I think of ways of adding value to you. In other words, before I'm with you, I know that I'm going to be meeting you. I look on my schedule every day and I say, okay, well, I'm going to be with Life Project today. And so how can I add value to you? I think about adding value to you before I'm with you. This is very important. It sets me up to do the best to serve and add value to you. I can think of my grandchildren. When a few years ago I was writing a book called Intentional Living, and I was teaching them how to live intentionally, because that's so huge. The most overrated words in the English language are good intentions. Good intentions have never done anything. Nobody's life has ever been changed through good intentions. Their life is changed through good actions. And intentional living is the bridge that takes us from intentions to action. And so I was having dinner with my grandchildren, and I was talking to them about how are you going to add value? How are you intentionally going to do this the next day when you go to school? And my youngest grandchild, James, who was 9 at the time, said, Papa, tomorrow when I go to school, I'm going to open doors for people all day long. I'm going to be a door opener. And he said, I'm not only going to open up doors, he said, Papa, I tell you what else I'm going to do. I'm going to smile, and I'm going to say, have a good day. So the next evening he called me on the phone. He said, Papa, I had a great day. I said, tell me about it, James. He said, I opened doors for 47 people today. 47 people. He opened doors for them. And he said, I not only opened doors for them, I smiled and I said, have a good day. Have a good day. Now, he's 9 years old. He's already understanding how to add value to people. But why did he open that many doors? Why did he smile and say, have a good day? Because he thought ahead of how he was going to add value to people. That is essential. That is key. Don't miss this. This is so important. Every day I value people. Every day I think of ways to add value to people. Thirdly, every day I look for ways to add value to people. Yes, I look for ways. Look for ways to add value to you. Now, this is important. We see things not as they are. We see things as we are. So if I'm a person that looks for ways to add value to people, guess what I'll see? Ways to add value to people. Just as if I'm a person that has no desire to add value to you at all, I won't see ways to add value to you. You see, I see what I'm prepared to see. I see what I am. That's why two people could be with you all day, and one person adds value to you. They're a plus in your life, and the other one's a minus. One is looking for ways to add value to people. And by the way, in the area of values and relationships, let me just say this because it's very essential. Every one of us, we're either a plus in people's lives or we're a minus. We're either adding value to people, or to be honest with you, we're kind of probably taking value away from people. So every day, I value people. Think of ways to add value to people. I look for ways to add value to people. Number 4, I do things that add value to you. You see, I become a person of action. It's wonderful to value people. It's wonderful to think of ways and look for ways to add value to people. But the bottom line is, did I do it? Did I do it? My dad used to tell me the parable of the frogs, where he'd say, John, 5 frogs were on a log. 4 decided to jump off. How many frogs are left? I'd say 1. He'd say, no, 5. Well, that made no sense at all. I'd say, Dad, you said there were 5 frogs on a log, but 4 decided to jump off. Well, if 4 decided to jump off, there's only 1 left. He said, no, just because you decide to jump doesn't mean that you did. You see, it's the action that makes the change. So every morning, I look at my schedule. I did this morning. I looked at my schedule. I knew I would be in the studio teaching, and I saw that I would be with Pastor Jose in Life Project, and I asked myself a very simple question. How do I add value to you? To you. So in the morning, I look about where I'm going to see and who I'm going to see and when I'm going to see them, and I say, how can I specifically add value to those people? Every evening, I review my day, and I ask, who did I add value to today? And how did I add value to them? I think this is essential. Every day, I value people, think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people, do things that add value to people. And number 5, every day, I encourage others to add value to people. That's why we're together right now. I have the opportunity to talk to you about values and legacy. But the success of this talk is not what I'm sharing with you. The success of the talk is what you do with what I'm sharing. You taking what I give you and saying, I'm going to do that in my life. I'm going to apply that to my life. You see, all transformation has at its roots application. Our lives aren't changed until we take the action to change those lives. So when we think of Life Project and the heart of Pastor Jose and what he's wanting to accomplish and the good things that you are accomplishing, I congratulate you for those. I just want you to know that values and legacy are essential. And as I look at my list of 29 things that my father taught me, I can tell you without any question, these are values that are now my legacy. I have time. Let me give you, I don't know, maybe another 1 or 2. My father, another lesson that he taught and lived in front of me, was to travel the high road. Now, when we talk about traveling the high road, we're talking about more than the golden rule. You know, the golden rule says, treat others in the way that you want to be treated. That's a good rule. That's a great value. But when you travel the high road, I would say that's not the golden rule. I'd say that's the platinum rule. It's a little higher even than treating others as you want to be treated. The platinum rule basically says, treat others better than you want to be treated. In other words, go the extra mile, turn the extra cheek. This is a major teaching. You see, my father said, take the high road. He also said, not only travel high, but travel far. There's in the Bible, there's the second mile teaching. If somebody asked you to go in Bible times to walk a mile with them, you were obligated as a fellow citizen to do that. But after the mile was over, you weren't obligated to go the second mile. And Jesus said, go the second mile. In other words, do something that's beyond the law or obligation. Give a little extra effort, a little extra care, a little extra time. So my dad, he said, John, walk the second mile, travel far, take the high road, travel high. And the high road is that platinum rule: treat others better than they treat you. I saw my father do that. My father was the president of a college, and he had about 3 board members that were, they just gave him a difficult time. In fact, I was in college, and I could tell that board meetings sometimes became very difficult because these 3 board members were pretty negative and quite jealous. In fact, 2 of them kind of wanted his job, and so it was a kind of a contentious board. It wasn't one that was building. It was kind of one that was pulling apart. And there were times when they just kind of abused my dad. Just instead of taking high road with him, they took low road. And I watched my father turn the other cheek. I watched my father smile. I watched my father live above all the pettiness of those board members. Now, as a college kid, it really made me mad. In fact, I wanted to go in and set them straight. But my father, wise, filled with the Spirit, filled with the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, joy, long-suffering. He took the high road. My mom was the librarian at the college, and so I would have a key and I would sneak in late at night when the library, quote, was closed, and a lot of times I would study. One night I was in the library over in the corner studying, and my father came into the library. He didn't know I was there at all, and he kind of went over very close to where I was quietly kind of hidden, sitting. And he began to pray for the board members. He began to pray for those that had taken advantage of him and just had, quote, done him wrong. And I listened to him as he prayed and asked God to love them and forgive them and asked God to give him a love for them and asked God to help him to take high road. He finished that prayer and he walked out of the library and he didn't know I was there. In fact, it was several years before I ever told him this story. But that night marked my life because I watched my father treat others better than he was treated. I watched my father turn the other cheek. I watched him live out this value. Today, it's ingrained in me. Not because I'm naturally a good person. It's ingrained in me because I saw it in my father.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.